Well, hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy. Now, this is the final episode of 2024. Raul, I think you've got just a couple hours left, right? You've only got 10 hours left in 2024. Is that right?
That's a little more than that. I think so. It's actually, yeah, you're right. I have less than 10 hours left for the new year.
I've
So,
got
yeah,
just
very
about
little
one more
time.
day
Can't
left.
imagine. Can't imagine the whole years passed by so quickly, and what an eventful year it's been.
I think I'm going to mark all my emails as unread, as read, and just be done. Try to start fresh from 2025.
I gave up on that a long, long time ago. My email inbox is about 24, almost 23 years old now. And I have over 1 million unread emails over that period. So I just had a policy of never deleting an email, it just sits there.
It's a good idea.
Uh, I figure that when someone needs me urgently, they'll ping me or call me. Uh, but anyway, that's something to change, I guess, in the new year. What are your New Year resolutions?
Well, I'm going to focus more. I'm going to do some fitness work. I'm excited about that. I got a punching bag in the garage, and so I've been workouts with the punching bag, and that's been really fun. And do
Nice.
more long form AI content. I
Hmm.
think there's and a bit more zoomed out. I think that still I want to be doing a lot of building, a lot of very detailed work, but then also take some time to think about where is this all going? What are we doing? Uh, is this a net good, a net bad? Think do a little bit more of that content as well, and
Nice.
really leverage AI to be more productive in the time that I do have, so that I can have more, more time with the kids and that sort of thing.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun and way more productive as well. That's pretty awesome.
Well,
Hey.
considering it is the end of the year, no, I think 2024 is obviously the AI year, and we just got back from reInvent. This is
That's right.
the 2024 reInvent sweater. Not my favorite reInvent sweater. I'm wearing it for effect. I think I'll stick with 2023.
Yeah, the black one was actually quite nice.
That was 22. I like that one a lot.
22. Yeah. Uh, Finally, I think I saw it and I was like, okay, in Chennai, I'm not really going to use it. Didn't make sense to get one. But I have the lanyards from all the years that I'm still hoarding and collecting after each reinvent.
They are good keepsakes.
Right.
Well, I wanted to take the time we have left in 2024 to think about what are our predictions, and then I want to revisit this episode 365 days from now and see what happened. So, what are our predictions in the FinOps, AI, AWS space of what we're going to be talking about this time next year?
Got it. So here are my predictions. I think number one is the hype over the chat interface or just a single LLM based chat is going to become less of the, will have less of the hype. I think the agentic use cases are going to explode like crazy. Having agents actually do real work for you is going to be the front and center focus. Second, I think development started changing this year in 2024, but I think next year you're going to see dev teams be significantly impacted, both positively and negatively, um, with the way the agentic approach to development is kind of taking shape. It's going to question everything from what we consider good code to how we manage code, how we maintain code, how we ship continuously. It's going to cause us to question all of it and figure out the new protocol for developing code and applications and so on.
As an example of that, we had talked earlier in our hackathon episode, which I'll post as a separate link, because that's a bit more slow paced, using Shad CN for front end, and not because it's the most beautiful framework of all time, but because you get the code right there, and so it's LLM friendly in that sense.
Correct.
So your LLM doesn't have to be trained on what a Shad CN button or text area is, because the actual component is sitting in your code base.
Exactly. So it's going to question us, it's going to cause us to question almost every aspect of how we are developing our systems, our code, and maintaining it. You are going to wonder whether you really need, you're going to ask the question about whether you really need to even maintain the code. Is it easier to let the LLM just generate new code and overwrite all the previous code? And that's totally fine, because I think the human effort is going to be way more expensive than just letting an LLM figure stuff out. And if it has to rewrite an entire app, that's probably going to be cheaper than trying to write it in a way that is maintainable for humans. So there are all these questions that are going to be, that'll come to the fore, and we're going to have to debate all of these and figure out what makes sense. The other area where I think this whole agentic model is going to make a huge, big change is in SaaS products itself. There's so much data that's underlying the SaaS products, but I don't think people have figured out how to leverage that well enough to present to customers. There are little pockets of agentic use where it's made sense, but we haven't seen the big wave yet. And I think that's happening probably in Q1, latest by Q2. So you'll see a lot of real world use cases really make a lot of sense.
Well, I like what you said about the chat interface, right? Because that's still extremely low bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
You could almost keep up with that in Morse code.
Yeah.
Right. In the grand scheme of things, the chat box is very low bandwidth.
Correct.
But being able to talk to it. So I use this app called Map Whisper, which is just a good front end to the various dictation options that are out there.
Yeah.
And getting into the habit of clicking on a text field and hitting the right keystroke and starting to talk to the computer instead, I find that that's actually faster. I can still talk faster than I can type.
Yep. Very, very true.
And then
so I think we're going to question some of that stuff as well about, whether we're actually going to be using the chat interface at all. There are times when the chat interface does make sense, but having a single LLM like logging into the OpenAI or ChatGPT or OpenAI's, Claude interface and using that as your primary mechanism, I think that's going to be less used in the future. And my last prediction is, I think you're going to see a lot more of integrations with AI. The key component of the AI to make it work for you is the context. So I think you're going to see a revolution and evolution of how this context is gathered from all these different systems and brought into wherever the data is actually being processed. And there have to be easier ways to do that. And I think you're going to see, versions of what Anthropic's MCP or the Model Context Protocol looks like. You're probably going to see a bunch of that happen in 2025.
Okay, well, let's make it a point then to review this 1 year from now. It's interesting here we talk about changes to the software development workflow. I notice when I'm iterating on a particular problem, like in Cursor Composer, I'll go back and forth for a while. And I've gotten to the habit of once it's solved, because sometimes you wander to the left or the right for a while and you finally nail down the solution that you were looking for. And then the last thing I'll do is I have a folder called docs. And for each problem that I've solved, I say, okay, now leave yourself instructions so that a future LLM could read them and jump right to the correct solution. Right? Like, how do you have how do you integrate a Lambda function and call it by clicking a button? right? That's a particular pattern that you'd want to save if you want to do it the same exact way in your app every time. And so you can see the app as you want it to be, or your coding standards being basically embodied as a set of documents. And this is how I do authentication. This is how I do object modeling, that sort of thing.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, I think it's going to change and make us question a lot of this stuff as we go forward. It's going to be exciting.
It is funny. I do feel like people our age, like we're very lucky in that we can appreciate, I think we have 98% of our programming career was pre-AI.
Yes.
And so it's amazing when you see things flying by. Oh yeah, I spent a week on that once. I spent 2 days on that problem once. And you're seeing these things, just this conversation happening with an agent to itself.
Yeah.
And you're seeing all of the, week on that, 2 days on that, 3 days on that. And you can appreciate how good it is. But you can also, I think we both have a good experience reading code and knowing how to steer it in the right direction. And I do wonder how to teach that to people in the future without having to kind of suffer through doing all this stuff manually.
Yeah. I think, like, the more I think about it, this revolution is real. And we are lucky to live through it. Now it's a question of how do we adapt to it.
Yeah, and the jump is so, it's so big, right? Like you would never think, okay, in order to practice driving, I'm going to get really good at horseback riding.
Yeah. I think there have been significant jumps in the past in terms of these revolutions. But I think what's different on this one is that the time scales are so short. You've not had these kind of changes happen overnight in the past. And I think that is what is significantly different.
Yeah. What I mean is, how do you then prepare for it's easy to see, okay, we were born into a world that had cars for a long time. But but what I meant by my analogy is, how do you prepare someone to learn programming in an era where AI is so plentiful? I say, okay, you basically have to just teach them how to steer the ship, but don't worry about the underlying details. Or is that just going to be irrelevant in a year?
I think some of it might be irrelevant. So when I was studying computer science, the big thing used to be systems programming. There was so much emphasis on learning how to write an operating system or understanding the nitty-gritty details of how the operating system works, and the data structures of the operating system itself, how memory management happens. One of our projects was to write an operating system from scratch. Now, I don't think any of that stuff has been relevant for the most part of the last decade and a half or more, right? And the only thing we knew about it, or our grand ambitions, were that we'd be amazing system developers. Okay, we'd probably write embedded programs, that we'd write systems like operating systems and file systems and so on. There's a small niche of people who do that today, but for the large part, we moved to application programming for the most part, or we've all become application developers for a while. And I think you'll see a similar revolution. There's going to be a small portion of the developer community that's going to focus on understanding all the nitty-gritty details of what lies underneath. But the vast majority of users are going to just leverage that next abstraction layer to build the solutions that they want. It's just as simple as that.
For all of the suffering I did of making sure I knew how to delete a node from a B tree and recursively rebalance the whole thing, I've never once had to do that in my professional life.
Exactly.
Used a library that I hoped did that under the hood. And
I mean, right out of the gate, when I was first introduced to Java and I saw the collections library, I was like, okay, so what happens to all these data structures that we were using in the past, right? The collections library, you've got sets, you've got all of that in Java that, just made everything else obsolete.
Yeah, and they're in there somewhere. All
Yeah.
those good algorithms we suffered learning on whiteboards and made sure
Correct.
they worked. Okay, any other predictions for 2025? What about on the cost side?
Yeah, so I think costs is still to be seen. It'll all depend on the scale at which things expand. Like right now, the AI usage is still relatively small. The compute usage is huge in terms of the backends for these LLMs and stuff, but they're kind of focused on a small subset. So I think individually for every consumer of AI, I'm not entirely certain whether the costs are going to go crazy or not. However, I would add that uh, things have been changing so rapidly, it only takes one little trigger to cause a massive explosion in usage for a given customer. Like they just have to find that one click, one spark that says, oh, this is incredibly useful to us. And once that happens, you're going to see a big switch in costs. That's not happened for, I'd say, 95% of the folks out there today.
I've been thinking about it from almost a backwards perspective of right now at the end of, if you're just sitting there chatting with Claude or ChatGPT, you're going to burn through a couple of cents. And unless you write some loop to iteratively go through all of your documents, it's pretty hard to spend a lot.
Yeah.
But if you looked at it the other way and said, okay, I have to spend $5 an hour making myself more productive with AI, how would you do it? I think that's a reasonable amount of overhead. And how would you do it? Would you analyze a screenshot of your desktop once every 10 seconds and try to, I don't know, source yourself relevant information? How would you hit that spend level in a way that benefited you?
I would flip it a little bit differently. I would say if you were to subscribe to the pro version of almost every tool that's out there right now that you think applies to your work, it would probably add up to about $100 to $150 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that compared to what your comp is typically going to be for a month is nothing. If it can get you to 2x to 10x more productive, that is literally nothing. And so when I look at it from a cost standpoint, I actually think that the AI cost right now, as compared to the human costs, is minuscule. I don't know when we'll be at a point where we'd be like, oh, I'm spending $100,000 per year on this one tool that is equivalent to 5 humans that I would have otherwise hired. Right now, we're getting that out of $100 spent.
Yeah, it's really cheap, all things considered.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's funny how our psychology around cost is so wrong, but that's a whole other discussion.
Exactly. Anyway, so it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. But I'm excited about 2025. It's going to be an amazing year.
Definitely. We wanted to wrap up the final episode of It Was Made Easy for the year. Just a thank you to the guests, everyone who's watched, all the guests who've been on the show. And we have some really good ones lined up for January, February, and of course from beyond. Going to see how we can do AI powered, make all the other things convenient with AI so that we, the humans, can focus on getting you the very best content and insight that we can.
Absolutely. And a very, very special thanks also to all the folks at AWS who've been very, very generous with their time, who've helped us, navigate through a lot of questions and concerns that we've had, who've come on the show and shared their perspectives with the audience. So thank you so much. They've been an amazing partner to us, and also to all the guests who've come in and shared their perspectives. Their time is all very precious, and the fact that they've come on the show and shared it with all of you has been amazing. And we look forward to more of that in 2025.
All right. With that, I will. Let's see you next